Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to take you through the natal chart of Nick Reiner. I know we're all interested in learning more about him as he is a suspect in his parents' murder from a couple of days ago. And he has quite a turbulent chart. There's a lot of very challenging aspects in here that I'm going to go over to really help us understand more about his psychology, where he came from, the issues with his family, and what was making things so difficult for him with his family, what the aspects are in here that could have potentially led him to commit this murder. So his date of birth is September 14th, 1993. He was born in Los Angeles. Per usual, I don't have a time of birth. I do have it at 12 o'clock p.m. because he is a celebrity. And I actually think that this time is pretty spot on for many reasons. One of them being is that he is a rising Scorpio with this birth time. So physically, rising Scorpios have quite intense eyes and an intense gaze. So if you think of some other celebrities who are rising Scorpios, like Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, maybe Jake Gyllenhaal, they have quite intense, kind of deep set, expressive eyes. I'm pretty sure Brian Kohlberger is a rising Scorpio as well. He's the guy that committed the murders of the college students in Idaho. So those are just some examples. And rising Scorpios can have like a sharper bone structure, almost gives them like a hawk-like appearance. Personality-wise, rising Scorpios could definitely have more of a guarded, kind of mysterious aura about them, especially when you first meet them. So I'm thinking about the famous interview he did with his father that's circulating the internet right now. And if you've watched that, you'll notice that Nick kind of skirts around a lot of the questions. He remains kind of mysterious and aloof. It doesn't seem like he really wants to fully answer the questions asked of him, and that he really doesn't want to give a lot away. So that's very classic Scorpio ascendant. They're really good at keeping secrets, not showing their hand. I also think that because he was in the interview with his father, there was a discomfort around being asked questions like this around his father, which has to do with some other aspects that I'm going to bring up in a bit. So, rising Scorpios are also known for wanting realness, authenticity. They want depth and they want the truth. And I'm wondering whether that clashed with his ability or the willingness to go to rehab, do the whole, AA 12-step program, because those programs tend to be a bit more surface level, if you will. They're more so about coping skills. They're great for people who need to learn basic skills, put one foot in front of the other, in terms of living a sober life. But I'm wondering whether it may not have been deep enough for him, or there may have been times that he struggled with feeling like it wasn't real enough for him, if that makes sense. Now, the thing that pops out for me is that at the top of the chart, he has Moon conjunct Chiron. And I will say, I just brought this up in a video the other day. This keeps happening that where it seems like there's a pattern of people that I'm doing videos on where they've been implicated in these murders, where they have a moon in Virgo. So we could do a whole video on that and why that could be. But I will say what I said yesterday in my video. I'm not saying that if you have your moon in Virgo that you're a bad person or you have a tendency to become a criminal or a murderer. I just think it's an interesting pattern that I'm seeing in the videos I'm doing anyway. So Moon conjunct Chiron basically means this is very challenging. So, Nick is a very sensitive person. He definitely feels wounded around his sense of home and early childhood experiences. And when the moon is conjunct Chiron, dysfunction in the family is pretty common, and someone could feel as though they don't quite belong in the home, in the family. And that's definitely going to be a theme throughout the rest of his chart. So the fact that this is on his midheaven or it's close to his midheaven, it means that all of this wounding is destined to become publicized. It may have already been the case a little bit with that movie he did with his father because it was all about the addictions he's been through, homelessness, but even more so now because of this crime and him being charged or suspected of murder. It's going to be more, even more apparent for the world to see all of the wounds that he's been through. By the way, I don't know if he has been officially charged yet. I know he's being held without bail, so he's definitely like the prime suspect, but I don't know if things have progressed beyond that at this point. Um, Now he has this T-square, which is an aspect I've gone over in a couple of my other videos. This is a very challenging aspect for somebody. In this case, it comprises an opposition between his Venus, his Saturn. Both of these planets are also making a square to his Pluto. And so whenever you have a T-square in a natal chart, it's going to show up as the sideways triangle. It's different than a grand trine that also shows up as a triangle in someone's chart, but it just looks quite different. The T-square is always going to be this kind of sideways triangle, and if someone has a grand cross, it's going to make another sideways triangle, but we'll get into that in a bit. So not only does Nick have his Venus opposing Saturn, he also has his moon opposing Saturn. It is out of bounds, but it is still in opposition. So this adds another piece of the puzzle to us for, you know, it tells us that this is someone who has definitely struggled with low self-esteem, a lot of criticism, especially from his father, probably. Saturn represents a father figure. And I'm going to focus a lot on Venus because it is part of the T-square. So, similar to the moon making the opposition to the Venus, this reveals that he has low self-worth. He's been criticized a lot in his relationships. He has a tendency perhaps to hold back in relationships out of fear that he will be rejected. So that's what I was talking about in the video with his dad. It seems as though he feels hesitant to really express himself in front of his father. And I think that has a lot to do with these aspects making the opposition to Saturn. So with Saturn making the opposition to Venus, um, yeah, he holds himself back. He feels he's unworthy of love. Now, typically we think of Venus as meaning romance and dating, romantic relationships. But in general, Venus is about what we want and it's about what we desire. And it is in the ninth house here for Nick. So I'm going to be mainly focusing on his general desires and his wants in the ninth house. So, being that Venus is in the ninth house, this tells me that Nick is someone who really wants freedom to believe what he wants to believe. So, for instance, his parents wanting him to confine himself to rehab, he's done this before. Perhaps it doesn't align with his philosophy and his way of thinking. Like I said before, usually rehab is extremely regimented, it's extremely rigid. And Venus in the ninth house wants anything but restriction. It's a Sagittarius house. So he wants freedom, he wants abundance, and he doesn't want to be forced into studying or adapting a belief system or a way of living that's really not going to align with his own thinking, his own beliefs. To take it a step further here, Venus is in Leo in the ninth. So What this tells me is that he really wants to be the authority. It's Leo. He wants to be in charge, and it's going to make this opposition even stronger, because, he's definitely not going to want to be controlled. And so, like I just said, he's going to have a very hard time meeting in the middle if he feels that his belief system is challenged or restricted. So I'm wondering if around, the past months, the past week or so, his parents, specifically his father, was shaming him. Maybe he was failing to try and really understand Nick and where Nick was coming from. And this is all getting channeled through Pluto. So whenever Nick feels this restriction, this shaming, this criticizing, he's going to, or it's all going to come out through Pluto. So he's going to want to become controlling. He's going to want to end things, perhaps. I wouldn't be surprised if he's cut himself off from his family numerous times in the past. But of course, now it's the ultimate cutting off from them because they're dead. So, that's something to consider in terms of him having committed this crime if he actually did this. Um, this is also a fixed T-square, so the planets are in signs that have fixed energy. So if you think about the word fixed, it means just that. He's going to be stubborn, and he's really, really not going to want to be moved or told what to do. He's really going to dig his heels in. So a fixed T-square makes things even more challenging for the person or for the people around that person, because the person just does not budge. They hold on to the nth degree. Now, in the transits, I know I don't have a transit chart, but I just want to say that Uranus is making its final pass in the late stages of Taurus. So when this crime occurred, it was at 28 degrees of Taurus, so it would have shown up on this side of his chart. And this would have filled in the T square. So it would have made it like a fixed grand cross for him. And Taurus is all about being comfortable, having stability, having possessions, having all of your stuff around you. So I could see Nick on the day of the murder or around the time of this really fighting his parents tooth and nail. Maybe they're wanting him to check himself into a hospital, a rehab, or they're threatening him with that. And he is saying, no way, you're not going to take my things away from me. You're not going to make me uncomfortable. I am holding on to all my stuff. You're not going to take this away from me. The next aspect I'm going to go over is that he has Mars conjunct Jupiter. And so this is someone who's very prone to taking risks and really kind of overdoing it. This is very much classic in terms of an addictive personality. So people with Mars conjunct Jupiter, they're very energetic. They can be quite reckless and impulsive. I want to mention too that in the transits and at the time of the murder, Mars was at 29 Sag. So that already made people in general tend to be quite risk-taking, daring, kind of like going for things headfirst without really thinking about it. So that's something to consider as well. But going back to Nick, um, what this also tells me is that he was really tireless about standing up for what he believed in. Again, Jupiter doesn't just mean abundance and expansive energy. It has to do with knowledge and what your belief system is. So Nick was very quick to stand up for himself, quick to stand up for what he believed in. And this is all in the 11th house. So he's very drawn towards unconventional ideas and new ways of doing things. again, he may not want to do AA or rehab. To him, it might feel old, it might feel outdated. It's like, been there, done that. I need to do something different. I need to look for the unconventional. Um, he does have Mars, Jupiter making the square to Uranus, Neptune. And I will say that Mars square Neptune is a pretty challenging aspect. So, somebody with Mars square Uranus can become very hair triggered. He may become violent, and he's really eccentric and different. Again, someone like this is going to pride themselves on being different, someone who marches to the beat of their own drum. They are really not, they don't fit into the conventional molds of society, and they really take pride in that. Uranus conjunct Neptune is quite common. So if you were born around this time in the 90s, you probably have this in your chart. It doesn't mean anything negative whatsoever, but it does mean that someone is very interested in progressive ideas and they might really tend to reject traditional systems and conservative ways of thinking. So that just goes back to what I was saying before, that he wants to do things differently, out with the old, in with the new. I want to talk about the fact that Pisces rules his fourth house, and fourth house is the home and family. So, what this could mean for Nick is that there were likely issues with boundaries in his family and at home. So, also, Pisces is co-ruled by Jupiter and by Neptune, and these are the planets that are responsible for making this square to one another. So, what this tells me is that Nick wanted to push the envelope. He wanted to push what his sense of boundaries were in his family. I wonder if he felt like the boundaries kept sucking him in. The boundaries were quite nebulous and unclear. So Pisces is really not very direct. It's not concrete. It's not straightforward. It's ambiguous. It's fuzzy. It's unclear. So I'm wondering with this energy and the square, whether Nick really tried hard to set himself apart from his family, do things differently, get away from them. But the problem is, especially with Mars making the square to Neptune here, is that in his attempts to push away from his family, he may have become more lost and he may have fallen deeper into addiction. So I think his family was right, obviously, in wanting to get him help. They wanted to center him. They wanted to, make sure he was getting the help he needed. This is someone who's quite uncentered. So, I think he definitely needs that. Um, and another thing that I want to say is that his south node, north node is quite interesting here. So, South Node in Gemini, um, he has a bit of a scattered energy anyway. I mean, again, this is really not someone who's centered. So, being that it's in the seventh house, he probably feels more at home in chaotic, busy, unstable environments or being in relationships that are inconsistent. Um, but with the North Node in Sag in the first house, he needs to come back to himself. He needs to really focus on what it is that he believes in, what it is that he believes in about himself. He needs to boost his self-esteem. Second house matters also have to do with self-esteem. But I'm thinking that when someone's North Node is in their first house, they really need to learn how to come back to themselves. So he needs to learn to get away from relationships and to come back to him. What does he believe? What does he feel? What is right for him? So, ironically, I think prison. might be his best shot at achieving this North Node because he'll be in a place where he's completely turned off from the outside noise and chatter of society. I'm not saying that prison is a completely serene, meditative place. Of course it's not. But I do think he's going to have more of an opportunity to get sober, to really tune into himself and develop himself. So that's my analysis on Nick Reiner. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have questions. There's a couple things I didn't bring up, Mercury and Libra, for instance. So chime in if you have more ideas. If you're interested in true crime and you're interested in astrology, please subscribe to my channel. I'll be doing more videos focusing on the natal charts of people in true crime in the media. And thank you so much for watching.